From the Oklahoman newsroom, this is Football Friday, the OSU edition. Signing day fast approaches, and we're here to talk about the Cowboys signing class. I'm Jenny Carlson, joined by fellow columnist Barry Trammell, OSU beat writer Kyle Fredrickson. And Kyle, right now, it looks like OSU's signing class, while not in ink yet, but commitment-wise, there's not a whole lot of work left to do, is there?
Yeah, we look at where this class is now compared to last year. Last year at this point, everyone's sort of wondering, well, where's the quarterback? Who's going to be their guy after Nick Starkel decommits? Yeah. So it was sort of this nationwide search in the last month of this cycle to try to find who that guy was going to be. This year, the Cowboys, it seems like they're a little bit more stable, in terms of those late decommitments. We haven't seen a lot of them. A few offensive linemen in December and then back in May before that. That is an issue they might have to address late here, but I don't know that they're in a mad scramble to do that, especially after they got a commitment from Tyler Moore, the Minnesota center transfer, who will sit out this fall but come back next fall as possibly a replacement for Brad Lundblade. Mm-hmm. So they really have the pieces in place, I think, at this point where OSU knows what they have in this class. They like what they have, with a couple four-star receivers, another talented quarterback, Jelani Woods, who can really make an early impact if given a chance. So I think they like where this class stands, kind of in the 30s to 20s range in terms of ranking by some of these services. So about what the Cowboys expect.
Barry, I know recruiting rankings can be squishy ground to stand on, and yet when you look at these overall rankings in classes, you usually have a pretty good sense of how good these players are when you lump them all together, maybe not on an individual basis, but the Cowboys being like 33rd or so ranked, is that cause for concern, or is that just par for the course that they tend to sort of be somewhere in that 25 to 35 range, and then they tend to build these guys up and make them into a team that can compete for the Big 12 championship?
It's certainly not cause for concern. You'd like to be higher. You'd like to be 20th. You'd like to be 11th. You'd like to be first. But the truth of the matter is, this is a cottage industry that is somewhat grounded in truth, but not wholly. If a guy's commits early to Oklahoma State, his stock is not that high compared to a guy who commits early to Alabama. We've seen guys go from 0 stars to 3 stars literally overnight just because of who they commit to. So Oklahoma State is, whatever Oklahoma State's been doing, I would recommend keep doing it because the program's better than it's ever been. They've had more success collectively over the 4, 5, 6 years period previous than ever before. So I wouldn't get too worked up about it. They've done a nice job of recruiting talent. They've also done a nice job of developing talent. So just filling needs, making sure you got enough offensive linemen, getting some tailbacks in to replace all those seniors that were gone, making sure you get a quarterback. As long as you're doing that, I think Oklahoma State's going to be okay.
And I wrote in the paper this week about how OSU, their strategy a lot of times is just to find the best athlete on the field. And a lot of times these multi-positional guys aren't your 4-star, 5-star talents, right? Because those are the guys where you identify them so early. Oh, this guy looks like a college receiver. Oh, he looks like a college linebacker. Those tend to be the guys who are more specifically classified to one position. So I think even just by strategy, it's not very likely OSU is going to find those guys when they love, finding those under-recruited kids who just do everything at one school and then mold them into what they want to be.
Well, Kyle, you referenced that story, and Barry, I thought it was interesting to see what Mike Gundy had said about that. After they had that Fiesta Bowl year, they were in on some guys that were maybe a little bit higher profile, and they're on the finalist list, and it's coming down to signing day, and you're feeling good about it. And then when it comes down to it, that kid may or may not pick you. And in some instances, it wasn't that OSU got picked and they got sort of left at the altar. We were talking during Football Friday, the OU edition, about rings on fingers, and they sort of got left at the altar. And you sort of have to have a contingency plan there. It seems like they've learned from that.
There's a lot of strategy in recruiting that some people don't really understand. The new Texas coach, Tom Herman, has talked about that in the last couple of weeks, that, coming in on a transition year, he doesn't want to go and do the traditional Longhorn tactic of just going after all the best players in the state. And he said we might get some, but if we don't, we're going to be down the road needing lots of players. So he's been more tactical in his approach, more like what it seems like OSU has been doing for several years. So different schools, you have to do it differently. And there's a way that Oklahoma State sort of is required to do it. And they've been doing it well, and it's been working. So I think you can't just go say we're going to go after the best players because if you don't get them, The prom could arrive and you don't have a date.
Now we're on to prom. Kyle, you referenced a little bit ago the best athletes, and OSU really trying to identify those guys. And sometimes those guys are speedsters, guys that can really get out and run. And we've seen Oklahoma State have some guys that have played football but have also run some track. What's been the influence as it relates to those track and field guys?
Well, it's interesting how these programs are linked a little bit, because when we talk about the OSU football program, Mike Gundy will go down as one of the best coaches ever here, if not the best, for the success that he's had. Well, you look at the track and field program, Dave Smith has done what Mike Gundy has done, and then plus 1,000. I mean, national titles in cross country. Consistently being, Big 12 Coach of the Year, whether it's in cross country or track, the way that he's sort of molded this program into a national contender is noteworthy when you have a guy like Chuba Hubbard, the Canadian speedster at tailback in this class for the Cowboys. He wanted to run track as well as play football in college. So when OSU can sell not only their football program but also their track program, getting them in touch with Dave Smith and the staff that they have there, I think that really aids in their decisions, is going to help OSU get some of these, high caliber athletes. And like I said, this is a program that's on the rise with the track and field team. With a guy like John Teeters last year was a first team All-American at sprinter when this was a program for years, hadn't really competed at that scale with some of these sprinting events. So when you're able to sell that, the past success, it's only going to help in getting some of those incredibly fast guys, Tyreek Hill type of guys who have that world-class speed, sort of what Chuba Hubbard's expected to possibly bring. If you can create that sort of brand for your school, it's going to help the Cowboys move forward as they just try to find these freak athletes.
Yeah, Barry, we've seen over the years college football players be dual athletes. I mean, baseball, wrestling. Marquise Overton, one of the linemen at OU right now, is going to go wrestle. We've seen that over the years, historically and recently. But it seems to me like track and field, when you're talking about sprinters, yes, I know you can't go out and just run fast. There's, you got the starting blocks and all that stuff. It takes some practice. But you're talking about a skill that translates great. I mean, hitting a fastball is not going to translate to stopping a Big 12 offense out there. This seems like a really natural fit that could benefit the Cowboys in lots of ways.
Yeah, and you make a great point about the wrestling. I've seen some baseball players that have worked out well with football. We've seen it at OSU. Josh Fields was a
right.
all Big 8 third baseman, or all Big 12 third baseman, as well as the Cowboy quarterback. But when it comes to track, what you really have to do, and you have to get the football coach on board, because football rows the boat. Mm-hmm. And football coaches, if you say, this guy's got a really good swing and he can really throw strikes, doesn't mean anything to a football coach. That doesn't help a football coach. But when you're talking about a guy that can run fast, all of a sudden, a football coach can get his arms around that and say, you're right. I can see where this is a real talent, and this is a talent that does help me. So I think there's a natural disposition to sort of embrace track perhaps more. There's also the idea that he might not need to practice as much or as structured
right.
with a track team as he might with a baseball team or a wrestling team or whatever. So, what I'm waiting really to see is the great football player, because then you got the two big egos butting heads.
Yeah.
Seen it a little bit over the years. R.W. McQuarters, before him, Melvin Gilliam, another Tulsa, Washington guy, did it at OSU. But for the most part, football coaches are pretty careful to let guys go. Track's the one place where they probably got the most patience.
Yeah, I would definitely say so. Well, let's finish with this, Kyle. As we look at this class and some of the really notable guys that are coming in this recruiting class, a consistent theme with these guys is Marcus Arroyo, the running backs coach for the Cowboys, who has become something of a superstar in recruiting. I mean, he's really become, I don't know if he's the guy on the recruiting trail, but he's definitely a guy that the Cowboys are depending on to go get some of their best players.
Yeah, and it makes sense, too, when you look at the staff and how it's composed, the experiences behind each of these guys, their ages, sort of their life situation. Here's Marcus Arroyo, 37 years old, very relatable, very young, just his energy. We only get to talk to these assistant coaches all but one time a year, but I know even for us, some of the most engaging conversations we have are with Coach Arroyo. because he has that NFL experience, sort of the confidence that comes being with a young coach with a lot of responsibility. And I think that translates to his conversations with a lot of these high school kids. You look at what he did even in his first year bringing Cowboys in. Justice Hill was one of the first OSU players to commit this past class. And, he goes on to be the Big 12 Newcomer of the Year. This year he gets running back commits from both Georgia and Canada. So, range that we don't see at a lot of other position groups in recruiting. So I think the Cowboys really are selling the fact of what this guy brings to the staff, sort of the unique dynamic of his past. I mean, Todd Monken basically swears him off as one of the best assistants he's ever had, calling him a superstar. So, when you have a guy at Monken's level saying that about a coach, that's quite the endorsement. So a lot of things to like about him. I think the biggest question is how long can the Cowboys hold on to him? Because for a second off season, we saw his name getting thrown into the mix for some openings. Even this year at San Jose State, his alma mater, where he played quarterback. So at some point, I see him moving on as being a coordinator or a head coach, depending on what he wants to do. Being that, like I said, he's 37, he's young, and I would imagine he'll have some options, especially after this next year, if Justice Hill keeps doing what he did last year.
Yeah, when we talk about Marcus Arroyo, Barry, it makes me think: is recruiting just? I mean, does it come down to being a young coach's forte? I mean, when you look at Marcus Arroyo, I'm not saying he's the only effective recruiter on OSU's staff, but lots of times you tend to see, especially when a staff sends multiple coaches into the home, they'll send maybe the head coach, the coordinator, but then there's always those outliers of like, well, this guy's a defensive player. Why is this offensive coach there? And lots of times it's because they're the young guy on staff, they're relatable. Does that speak to that? Or, I mean, when we think back in the day, you think about guys like Pat Jones, going out and selling the Cowboys. He wasn't necessarily the young gun on that staff. Barry Switzer going and doing. I mean, has it changed some, do you think?
Well, I think social media has changed it a lot. It's still a young man's game for a lot of reasons. Now, an old guy can still recruit, and a lot of them do really well. But there are things that shifted in the area of a young man. For one, is just the time and the energy.
Yeah.
When you're 31, you got a lot more energy than when you're 58. The technological savviness, all the new things with Instagram and chat and all that kind of stuff. So, 31-year-old more likely than the 58-year-old, and just the relational. Connecting with a high school kid doesn't mean he can't connect with a 58-year-old, but he's more likely to connect with a 31-year-old. So everything pushes it younger and younger. Doesn't mean it has to be, but certainly that's why you see some of the young guys doing really well in recruiting.
And Arroyo is a guy, when you look at the social media aspect, Kyle, he's especially active on social media, with the way you can connect with recruits and different things via Twitter and Instagram and those sorts of things.
Yeah, with how vague these guys have to be, sometimes it's like deciphering Russian code or something, where they are and who they're looking at with all the weird recruiting rules, how they can sort of acknowledge these guys but not really. But yeah, Arroyo, he's big on that. He talked about that last summer. If you can have one extra plus about you, one extra positive, basically, he said, if recruits can look at your Twitter page and stay for 20 seconds longer than they would have, he figures that's a plus in his book. So taking any advantage he can get, that's a good resource when you're a young coach trying to move up. All
right, we've got lots more signing day coverage coming before February 1st, the big day, National Signing Day. Be sure to stay with the best coverage team anywhere at newsok.com and every day in the Oklahoman.